G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and I want to talk about prices today. I know, shocking. This channel, prices, Games Workshop, yeah. Obviously, this has been the big talking point in the community lately, where people who normally don't say too much about prices, or who very rarely touch upon them, they're talking about this. Look, as an Australian, we're used to the high prices. We get screwed over by about 40 to 60% on every release from Games Workshop, so it's not breaking news to us. Obviously, $105 is the Australian price, but it's going for like £40, $85 US, something like that. It's ridiculous. I get it. I don't want to talk about this, so I'm not going to. This doesn't matter. What I thought would be more interesting would be to do some comparisons of products that Games Workshop sells, products that fulfill the same niche in different forces, as well as some that are the same size as one another, and some that have more complexity and less complexity in one another, and compare the prices, because I think that's more interesting. So the first one up on my list is here. I've included a little scale bar down the bottom, where I've scaled them to approximately what they actually are if you put them side by side on a table. I thought this is a pretty interesting one because I recently built a Warlord Battle Titan for Titanicus. Long story. 144 parts. It costs 180 Australian dollars. Next to it is the Imperial Knight Warden, 185 Australian dollars, so $5 more, but 250 parts. So it's got 40% more parts than the Warlord does, and it's a much bigger model. Then there's the Primaris Redemptor Dreadnought, which is only a smidge smaller than the Warlord, but it's $110, so significantly cheaper, and comes with 109 parts, which is not that many less than the Warlord. Now, what makes it interesting to me is you've got things like economy of scale. So one could argue that some models, such as headquarters units in different armies, you need less of them, therefore Games Workshop is going to sell a lot less of them, therefore they can raise the prices on them to try and cover whatever costs people can dream up. When you've got the Redemptor Dreadnought, you could say, yeah, people are, economy of scale. People are probably going to buy more Redemptor Dreadnoughts than they will buy Titanicus Warlords. So that could be one reason why the Warlord's more expensive. But then, are people going to buy more Imperial Knight Wardens than Redemptor Dreadnoughts or Titanicus Warlords? I highly doubt it. They're a big model, and not too many people have a use for them. Most people seem to top out about 3, but you get the occasional psychopath who likes to have a dozen of them. It happens, but there are psychopaths who like a dozen Warlord Battle Titans, so exceptions don't prove the rule, but I'd be very curious to see how it works out. But essentially what you have here is 3 models that, the Redemptor is significantly smaller than the Knight. True. But the Warlord is right in the middle. But it's not in the middle on price. It's very much closer to the Redemptor in parts, the quantity of parts, and yet the price discrepancies are all over the place. So, to me, there's no logic, rhyme, or reason here. I think it's just whatever marketing department pulled up and said, you know what, I think we can sell it for this. You might be able to turn around and say the Imperial Knight Warden is fantastic value for money. That's definitely an argument that could be had. You could say the Redemptor Dreadnought is fantastic value for money. You could say the Warlord Battle Titan is overpriced. None of those are the goal I'm trying to get to with the video. The goal I'm trying to get to with the video is that this is all over the shop. Here's another fun one. I decided to do something a little bit different with this one. So it's very hard to compare Xenos characters, but Zhang Zha was the one I picked. And I also picked Urian Rakath, because he's not so much smaller than her. In fact, if you look at the scale down the bottom, he's very damn close in size. Whilst she has the long spear and the big hair, he has that sort of Chiurgeon backpack that he's got going on with the extra arms and syringes and weapons, and he's floating up in the air on those little tendrils on his tiny little base. So, but he's got half the parts count that she does. And look, no army's going to need 2 Zhang Zhas or 2 Urian Rakaths, so you can't really say that it's economy of scale playing the part there. Even if you go off the fact that he's got half the parts she does, that only takes you up to about $56 off the top of my head, which is a far cry from $70. Maybe you have to pay the extra $14 to make up the difference for the 40mm base. I included a Librarian and Terminator armor in this image. Why? Because he's on a 40mm base, so directly correlates to Jane Czar's base size. People aren't probably going to take more than one of him in an army, but he's only got 9 parts, but he's much, much closer in price to Urian Rakarth. So maybe this is parts-based. Okay, let's move along. Space Marine Heroes. $85. That's 2 models. You get a Cataphracti and a Power Armored model. I've just included the Cataphracti on the scale. But you know he's about the same size as the Librarian and Terminator armor. He's on a 40mm base, the same size as Jane Czar. There's only 12 parts in there. It's kind of an easy-to-build kit. Well, then again, isn't Jane Czar, isn't the Librarian and Terminator, isn't Urian Rakarth? There's only one way you can build them. They're monoposed plastic models. Okay, what about the Masters of the Chapter? Well, I included the Masters of the Chapter because... well, that's 4 models, and they came out in white metal originally. I believe they're currently selling in Failcast, but still, Failcast and white metal are both far, far more expensive mediums than plastic. Now, the argument could be made that, yeah, you're having to produce an expensive mold to make the plastic miniature. That's true. Jane Czar's mold would have probably cost Games Workshop around $12,000. People will say ridiculous things like, oh, it's $50,000 for a mold. Yeah, it would be $50,000 for a mold for, say, a whole tactical squad, which is a massive set of sprues. Jane Czar's a character model. Character models usually don't get a mold unto themselves. They get an insert that goes into a universal mold, and they can put any number of characters in those inserts in order to cast up multiple different characters at the same time, and it saves them having to purchase the large, full-size die. They only produce, like a Lego brick, you can just clip into a much larger piece of the puzzle. So 4 of those guys, well, they're on par. And lastly, I included Marneus Calgar with his Victrix Honor Guard, who's admittedly much more expensive than Jane Czar. About 25% more expensive, in fact. But he's a much bigger model. He's also a single independent character who you're not going to need more than one of in the army. He also has 2 bodyguards who are technically bigger than Jane Czar as well. They're Primaris Marines, up-armored dudes. They are big and they are buff. But that's $90, 45 parts. So 3 times the parts of Jane Czar. Much bigger model, much bigger base, much more material involved in making him, and his die would be more expensive because there's more components to creating it. Another interesting comparison there. So Jane Czar, if I was to be a betting man, I'd say is probably overpriced by about 50%. She should be probably hovering around the $40 mark, $35 to $40 mark. But I think, and this is something I've previously touched on in other videos, is that Games Workshop plans ahead. They can set a price on a product, and then that product doesn't move for 3 to 5 years. But they set the price so expensive that as inflation slowly creeps up, they start making a huge profit on the model at the start. And as time creeps on, the profit gets less and less and less until it pretty much evens out to what it should be. Then they leapfrog the price again. That seems to be how they function based on the numerous graphs I've put it together, involving years and years of White Dwarf pages, where I took the prices of those pages, inputted all the data in, and I could look and go, oh, okay, over time, this is the leaps and bounds it takes. And just as inflation of wages starts to catch up with the models leap in price. That was interesting to note. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. Urian Rakarth, that Librarian, the Space Marine Heroes, they might all get a $15 jump in the next 2-3 years. She'll probably stay the same for a little while, maybe 5 years till she gets a price jump. That's my guess, but I could be completely wrong. It does happen. And the last one for today, because I didn't do too many of these, because, you get the idea by now. I thought I'd just compare some Greater Demons, because these ones are really all over the shop. So at the bottom I included a scale, and I also decided to include Be'lakor, because, well, you'll see. So in the picture at the bottom, we do have Scarbrand, who's technically he is a special character. He is not the typical Bloodthirster box, and he is more expensive. However, he uses many of the same components as the regular Bloodthirster, and the scale is correct. To the other greater demons, it works well, whereas the regular Bloodthirster in scale is up in the air a bit as he's sort of leaping on a chaos star / some fire into the sky. Point is, these are the greater demons in scale to one another, and as you can see, the Bloodthirster by far the cheapest at 170 Australian dollars. The Lord of the Change, a little bit more expensive, but 8 less parts than the Bloodthirster, who came in at a lovely 80 parts, so number of corn right there, an 8. The Lord of Change, 7 and 2, well that's 9, that's the number of Zench. Zinch. Keeper of Secrets, 5 and 1, well that together is 6, so that's the number of Slanesh. Unfortunately, the Great Unclean One letting everyone down because 5 and 9, 59 parts, doesn't make up than any of the numbers of Nurgle. So, damn, if you took the numbers, 8 and plus 0, you get the number of corn. There's some kind of conspiracy in there, surely. Went off on a tangent there. Okay, Keeper of Secrets, $230. Great Unclean One, $230. Be'lakor, $230. So it seems all three of those large new guys are all coming in at the same price. However, huge discrepancies in the number of parts. The Keeper of Secrets and Great Unclean One are closer, but you can see with each greater demon that's been released since the Bloodthirster, and the order was Bloodthirster, Order Change, Unclean One, Keeper of Secrets, the amount of parts in the kit has gone down significantly. The complexity of the parts and the kit has probably gone down since the Order Change. I think the Order Change was the most complex of the kits, due mostly to all the feathers and things like that, so much more sculpting time, much more work should have, in theory, gone into it than it did into, say, the Keeper of Secrets, which is, I think, a very simple sculpt. In comparison to the Lord of Change. It's not a simple sculpt in comparison to a potato. But yeah, so the parts seems to have nothing to do with the cost. The amount of volume, the amount of plastic, well, there's a lot more volume in the Great Unclean One than the Keeper of Secrets, so that's not it. And then you got Be'lakor. Be'lakor is a significant step up in the quantity of parts. And again, you could argue there's a lot more detail in it. It's a harder miniature to cast thanks to all the chains and such, and all the little skulls hanging off the chains, as well as his very intricate base and the swirly-whirly shit on his sword. So, what's to be garnered from this? Well, you could use multiple greater demons in an army, but you can't use multiple Be'lakors in an army. You're probably only going to want one of him. So he should probably cost more because of economy of scale. You're going to produce less of him because there's going to be less demand for him. Therefore, he should probably cost more. But he doesn't. In fact, I'd say he's probably one of the fairest prices in a long time from Games Workshop. $230 is probably damn good value. Now, not damn good value compared to, say, I don't know, Battletech or, take your pick of tabletop games, basically. Everything's cheaper than Games Workshop except for, Solid Gold chess. But in comparison to the Greater Demons, Be'lakor is cheap. He's a fantastic quantity of parts, beautiful looking miniature. What's not to like there? Whereas you compare that to the Keeper of Secrets, 51 parts. That's only 2/3 the amount of parts that Be'lakor himself has, and you're getting a similar sized miniature without the complexity of the wings. I don't know. I don't know the values there. So yeah, that's an interesting look from me today. As you can see, these are the miniatures that we've covered off on, and I think the point speaks for itself that Games Workshop's pricing makes no fucking sense. And it would take a madman to figure out what they're doing, and I've given it my best shot over multiple videos, but at this point, people either believe the methodology behind what I'm saying, or they don't. I can't convince people who don't want to be convinced or who think that everything is fine and dandy. Games Workshop cannot do any wrong. I can't change those kind of minds. I've put the information out there. I think this is a pretty fair representation of, we've got some completely different comparisons on the first page. We've got some very similar units filling similar niches on the next page. And then we've got direct units that can technically be played in the same army as one another. They'll fulfill the exact same slot in the army for the same uses in an army. ignoring psychic powers, I suppose. And you can see it's all over the place. No rhyme or reason to it. The amount of parts, not important. And I would say it's not important because, look, the design time on a miniature may or may not be involved in the costing of the final product, or just absorbed into the company as a general expense. I'm not sure. But the amount of material involved, you guys wouldn't believe how cheap plastic is to actually produce. Yeah, dies are expensive. If you have a $50,000 die, for, say, an Imperial Night Warden, probably is a $50,000 die. That sounds hugely expensive, but you got to remember, if you sell 10,000 kits, that's just $5 a kit you've got to expend to pay off that die. And every model you produce past that 10,000, that $5 just becomes additional profit. It's not expense at that point, unless you damage the die for some reason, but that's why insurance exists for these things. And believe me, companies take out insurance on dies. I should know, I work for a plastics manufacturing company. I help build dies. I perform maintenance on dies. I install dies into machines. I work with plastics every single day. I understand the industry, guys. Anyway, back with the Outer Circle. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll be curious to see if you're going to go buy these guys or really rate the price. See you all next time.